Former National Security Advisor John Bolton said he thinks Vice President Harris's foreign policy, if she is elected, would be like 4 more years of President Biden's policies. Bolton joined John Katzimatidis on his radio show Katz Roundtable on WABC 770 AM or 7070 AM Sunday to discuss international affairs and the election. Bolton criticized the Biden administration for its Afghanistan withdrawal and said he believes world leaders like Russia's President Vladimir Putin can sense a weakness, and that's why the war in Ukraine began. Oh my God. As Harris gears up for the election after Biden stepped aside, people have begun to question her policy stances and how she would handle foreign policy as the Russia-Ukraine war and Israel-Hamas war continue. Bolton said the extent to which Harris has a foreign policy plan is an open question, argued her administration would look like 4 more years of Biden at least. That's, I think, the best prediction you can make at this point, and that would just expose us as weak and undependable around the world, Bolton said. Harris has sought to embrace the Biden administration's work and policy, yet make a new name for herself. Her campaign has pushed that it's time for a new generation of leaders. She's generally been more critical of Israel's ongoing war in Gaza, but remains in public lockstep with Biden. Like Biden, she said a ceasefire deal needs to be reached, but has remained quiet about U.S. arms to Israel. Yeah, because she's not serious. Harris has also been supportive of Ukraine in its war against Russia and noted in the presidential debate last week that she's met with President Volodymyr Zelensky many times. Republicans have been critical of Harris becoming the Democratic nominee, accusing her of having a coronation after Biden withdrew. During her brief campaign, she's tried to set herself apart from Biden while still thanking him for the opportunity. During Tuesday's debate, she reminded former President Trump and likely the country watching that he wasn't running against Biden anymore. He's running against her and her ideas. You know, Bolton is another one of these people where if the United States had any type of, if American media, right, had any type of quality control, they would actually question him on his stances. He would be criticized for this extremely hawkish position that is just so antithetical to what most people actually want. Like, I could have sworn the majority of Americans, and it's been proven by polls, it's been proven by the positions of other politicians, have wanted out of Afghanistan for years. But Bolton finds a way to criticize Biden for finally getting us out of there. And man, when he said that okay, so, and I do think to his credit, it is fair to assume that Harris would be a continuation of Biden's foreign policy. And the reason I say that is because Harris has really not talked about international issues, and the few times that she has during this brief campaign, her positions have mostly been in lockstep with Biden. We haven't really seen any area where there's like some big giant disagreement. So I don't think he's wrong to infer that you're not going to see a change of policy from Biden on, international issues if she's elected to replace him. But when he says this would expose us as weak and undependable around the world, it's like, okay, first of all, there was nothing weaker than when Trump walked away from a peace deal with North Korea because they made fun of his vice president, or they had a war of words. Oh, this person said this about me, so we're going to rip up any attempt at having a peace treaty. And if you want to talk about undependable, how undependable did the United States look when the Iran nuclear deal, which came into effect under Obama, was ripped up 3 years later? I think less than 3 years later. Like, I know it was 2018, but it might have been, not technically 3 years, by Trump, but by the next Republican that took over after the Democrats were out of the White House. So if anyone should be criticized for being undependable, I would argue it's Trump. Now, when he says leaders like Putin look at the United States and sense a weakness because of our Afghanistan withdrawal, it's like, what is weak about looking at a conflict we've been embroiled in for 20 years and saying, look, this still is not over. There's no signs of things getting better. To hell with this. Like, I don't. It's really frustrating that they let people like this go on TV and talk as if they're actually saying something substantive when it's all just neocon bomb the world nonsense. Like, I have a lot of problems with Biden. I think he is way too pro-Israel, um, gives way too much money to Ukraine, has really abandoned American citizens. I mean, I think the problems of inflation and the housing crisis and all these other economic issues, infrastructure, all this stuff could be addressed with the money that we spend on these foreign conflicts. But I'm not going to criticize him for international incidents that have been going on for decades. Israel and Palestine have been not getting along for 70 years. Russia has had a dream of, or excuse, at least Putin anyway, has had plans to reunify with Ukraine for years. Like, this is stuff that whoever was president, whether Trump got a second term or Biden got beat out by someone else in that Democratic primary, these were going to happen almost guaranteed one way or the other. Now, how we respond to it as Americans is the one thing that we can actually, influence or change. And I don't see where Trump's response to either of these things would be any better than Biden. I've even said, like, I'd be the first one to come out clapping, cheering, and praising Trump if he said, "Hey, look, I don't like Israel treating the Palestinians like trash, so we're not selling any more weapons to them. We're cutting off all funding." But he won't do that because he's another one of these AIPAC-loving drones who will never cross the Israeli government, along with being friends with Netanyahu, but that's another subject. So the bottom line is that, unfortunately, whether you vote for Harris or Trump, you're guaranteed to see American support for Israel, and you're guaranteed to see more Ukraine-Russia conflict continuation. These are two things that are going to keep going no matter who you support. I wish we had better options, but it's just another part of why the U.S.'s democracy is such a failed experiment. No, Bolton's opinions are always fun to just kind of dissect because he really, like, he'll say something like, "Okay, I can kind of agree with this," yeah, and then right after I'll be like, "Well, it's bad that they want to end wars. That's terrible."